What's good, y'all? This is Afriqua here. I'm a producer and pianist from Hampton, Virginia, and I am very excited to show you how I use Ableton to turn my ideas into records. No matter what you're using to write your songs, whether you're at the piano, in your own head, on an oboe, doesn't matter. The most important thing is having a great idea. Without that, you ain't got nothing. And I'm sorry to say, Ableton's not going to give you that. No software will. But Ableton is great because when you have the inspiration and that moment really strikes, it is ready to go to bring that idea to fruition quickly and beautifully. So I'm going to show you how I record, how I comp my parts, and how I develop my musical ideas into full musical compositions. And I hope this will help you do the same when the inspiration strikes in your studio. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I love every part of the process, and I hope you'll enjoy seeing a bit about mine. So now I'm going to lay down my main keyboard part. We on some 1992 Fresh Prince of Bel-Air commercial break vibes. So now we're going to talk about comping. Comping stands for composite, which means something that's composed of two or more distinct separate parts. So I've made my first distinct and separate part, my first take, blue here. And I've just selected a bit of it and pressed enter. And now you'll see that the top take, let's call that our master take, now has that blue section in the MIDI. So with this second bit, I heard that I was rushing a little bit in the second take, which is orange. And now that part sounded nice, because the first time I wasn't rushing. I wasn't so excited. So I'm going to do the same for that little section after hearing it, and that little pickup note at the end, because we need that. And the point of this is just finding the vibe on each little section and seeing which version best serves the overall idea. And I think we got it here. So I'm going to go ahead and consolidate, and now I'm going to drag this into session view. And that is our main keyboard part around which we're going to base the track. So my rule with quantization is less is more. I'm going to select these, press Shift Command U, learn your key commands, and you'll see that I've got it at 15%, very, very light. You can always quantize to 100%, but if you do it slowly, you can hear every step along the way, and you can't unquantize something. So unless you want something to sound robotic, and sometimes that's dope, but even in that case, I would recommend just going step by step. Play it cool, play it cool. So I'm tightening this up a bit, leaving those top chime notes free as they were recorded for a little contrast, and I think that sounds good. So the reason I quantize this a little bit more than I usually would is because I'm actually going to add a groove to this. And this is going to change the timing and also the velocity of the notes to give it a different rhythmic feel. And I just put on this funky MPC groove, presumably the funkiest since it's at the bottom of the list. And this finally sounds like I wished I played it the first time. The power of MIDI editing, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go. So I really took the time to develop the idea for this track before I even opened Ableton. So what that means is now that I'm ready to add some distinct and cool musical elements, I already have most of what I need in that original keyboard part. So at this stage of the process, it's more like orchestration and less like composition. So I just added the bass, and that's just from isolating those bottom notes of the keyboard part I played. And I picked this kind of slap bass and keeping with the 90s Quincy Jones vibe. Now I'm doing the same thing for the middle voice here, isolating those chords that I played. And on that channel, I've got a really nice brassy and edgy synth and reactor. And same thing for this top voice, for these chime notes and the Rhodes. I've got a slightly different Rhodes sound, going through a spacey delay, which gives it some contrast. And that's going to be those top notes. And I'm actually going to mute those same notes in the original part for even more contrast. So these are really the type of decisions I like to make in the computer. Not so much what the song is going to be, but how I'm going to realize it sonically. And as you can hear, it's already starting to sound like a record because the idea was there from the jump. So one of the most underrated features is the file browser. I love sampling myself and sampling more generally, so it's great to be able to just drag them in like this. Just gonna ungroup them. And we groovin'. So now I'm going to jam on a few sounds that I've got set up here and use the capture button to record. It's amazing because you can always recall whatever incoming MIDI you're playing. So for instrumentalists, this is absolutely invaluable. So I just played that little pad loop, press capture, and there's the clip. I'm gonna bend these almost like a string slide with the MPE on those two notes. Now, let's see what's up with this. Sounds cool. Give it one more time. Capture. So sometimes it's a little bit wonky with where it perceives the loop to start and stop. But for simpler loops, it's perfect almost all the time. Let's see about this sound. Add a little counter to that one. So it's great not to have the pressure of always pressing record, to know that you can save your work. I like to just jam, land on something I'm cool with, like that. Sounds cool as a little counter. And that's in. So capture mode is super useful for spontaneous creativity, making sure you get everything you play, and not ever having to stress when you do something you can't do a second time. That happens to me very often. So now let's do that for another section. So I'm just searching for a nice melody here. Ooh, I like that. Say what? Say what? Cool. So just gonna set the loop length. Make sure that pickup is in there. Captured. Just come up with a little nice counter hook for that one. Maybe something like this. Oh, I like that. Let's get this looping right. Almost. There we go. So we gonna call that one Donnell, for those who know. This one Donnell answer. And we've got some really nice melodic elements to work with. So I've taken a few minutes to nerd out on the mix here, and the track is sounding a bit more 3D now. I've given a few key sounds some additional depth with effects. So I do that by adding some subtle motion to some of the main sounds here. So in this case, the Rhodes is being processed parallel as a synth. Got guitar rig on that, adding a nice modulated delay and reverb. Thickens it up. On the bass, you know, a lot of people like to stack their drums, and I do that almost always. Almost every drum sound I'll stack with something else. But I also like to do that with melodic sounds and synths. So in that case, I have the slap bass alongside the synth bass, adding a nice fat bottom into it. I've added some subtle motion with the phaser here. So just a slow modulating phaser. Just making each snare slightly different, very slightly different. It's more psychoacoustic than anything, but it does make a difference for the ear. The kick I've given a little bit more of an analog feel and brought together the two kicks that are stacked in there. So I use a bit of redux after the compression, and that mainly affects the high frequencies. And also some tape compression, which sort of rounds out that low mid. So it adds a little bit of a crispiness to the high end, and also brings out a little bit of that sort of low mid resonance. And I've also used hybrid reverb, which is absolutely dope. In this case, it's also very subtle. All of these mixing changes are quite subtle, but this could be used, you know, to such great effect if you want to use it more as an aggressive sound design tool, as you can hear here. But it's just as good to use for these subtle mixing things. So these very small things beef up the track quite a lot. And I think we're ready to arrange now. So between arrangement view and session view, when it comes to arranging your track, arrangement view would be the obvious contender. I mean, it is called arrangement view after all. But I always feel more creative in session view, actually. So I like to do as much of the arrangement as I possibly can in session view. So it's more like arranging the track vertically instead of horizontally. So in the case of the second scene, I've already made the decision the track's going to drop in a big way. All the elements are going to come in from that sparse keyboard intro that I started the track with. And now in scene 3, I'm going to have what I guess is going to be my pre-chorus with this rising synth and the counter melody. That first couplet of synths. Although now that I hear that, I think that I want the first time that synth comes in, the counter melody, to just start there where I soloed. So to create the transition that I want for this section of the track in session view, I'm going to create a transitional scene here. So I remove the stop buttons from all of these sounds because I actually don't need this scene to apply to those. I only want it to apply to the rising lead, its counter melody, and the Donnell lead sound, which is going to come in for the chorus in the fifth scene. So, for example, I don't want to hear this pickup note for the rising lead the last time it plays because it's just going to go duh, and then nothing's going to happen. For the counter melody, I'm making a dummy clip here, and I'll put a full version of it in this transitional scene. And I'm going to do something similar for the Donnell clip, making a dummy clip here. And here I'm going to do a version of it that just starts from the pickup, because I don't actually want to hear the full Donnell clip in the transition. So the reason I put those dummy clips in is because I'm going to take all of these clips now and put them into legato mode. And legato mode is dope because it's going to keep the play position of the clips even as I switch between them. So let me show you what I mean by that. Right now, I'm playing a muted version of the counter melody in the Donnell clip, but the clock is still going on them. And now when I trigger scene 4, it's starting from the same point, and then smoothly going into the full chorus in scene 5, with no awkward pickup notes, and everything playing as it should. Sounding good? So we've got a nice basic arrangement now. And speaking of session view flights of fancy, I think it's going to be cool to add a bridge. So let me show you how to do that. So for me, writing a good bridge is all about contrast. Contrast in rhythm. Contrast in melody. And contrast in harmony. And that's going to drop right back into our original loop. And I just captured that. So now I got it. So you saw earlier how I split up the original keyboard part, and I just did exactly the same thing with the bridge I just recorded. I'm going to play you the chorus first so you can hear how it works. So I added a little bit of a ride to thicken up the chorus from the Man's Nate Smith, representing Virginia. So it's a big dramatic change in groove, change in harmony, but using the same element so it still fits in the track. I did add that little clap, and I also added this synth on top. And then it drops right back to that original groove and melody of the first part. So continuing to enjoy the genius of Nate Smith, I'm going to take a fill from his sample pack here. Back in the day, I would have done that in arrangement view, that kind of detail, but with a little bit of thought, you can do it in session view just as easily. So I know that I want this crash to happen on beat 1 when the original melody comes back. And I know that I want this to happen at the end of the 8-bar phrase right before that. So the last measure of this 8-bar phrase is the fill, because I took that start point to -7 instead of 1. You'll hear how it works. Get it, Nate, get it. Sounds dope. So that's going to be a breakdown there. Call that break. This is our bridge. And while we're at it, this is our pre. And after that transition, there is our chorus. So in getting out of this breakdown, back to another pre-chorus, essentially doing another round of the track, I'm going to do something similar as I did before. So I'm muting these bass channels in this scene because I actually want this bass to come in just for the second half of the phrase to add some drama. I want the same thing to happen with the brass synth, the pad, and also the rising lead, but those are repeating every 4 bars, so I don't have to do anything with legato mode or anything like that. But similarly, I'm going to remove all of the stop buttons for that scene that aren't needed. I know the drums are going to come back here, right after that. I'm trying to make it where essentially the second half of this melody coming back picks up the drama and then it drops back into the drums. I like doing this with the sound off because it's a test of musical programming skills. I'm not sure how useful it is, but let's give it a try. So this should build, and then drop into the drums here, with everything playing as usual. And looks like it worked. So I think for this next scene, I want it to be another 8 bars of this, but with a counter melody. And then from there, we're in the home stretch. Using that original transition that only applies to those 2 clips. And back to the chorus. Beautiful. So now we've got a track that is fully arranged and all easily triggerable, if that's a word, in Session View. So now that I don't have to look at the screen, I'll put on some nice visuals, play this on the push, and that's how I'll finish the track.
Afriqua.
All right, y'all. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking with me, and I hope you learned something cool that you can use for your own music. I'm Afriqua. You can check out the full track by hitting the link, and take care. Peace.